Top of the morning, Grant Avery. Welcome to a very special AMA this week at the Busselton Chamber. We're chatting budgets 2021-22. Thanks so much for taking the time and joining us this morning, Grant.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Always happy to talk about the budget.
The budget. We didn't get to have a breakfast and a lunch, but you and I are here together, and hopefully folks in Busselton will get around to having a look at this, because it is an interesting budget this year. Maybe some things where we're thinking there's nothing really jumping out at us and really screaming at me to sort of take a lot of attention on the budget. Seems pretty almost, I'm not going to use the word like safe, but it's not a lot to grab onto for us. I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of an overview of the budget from your perspective, maybe first what came down from the Treasury, and then we can also have a look at what that means for us here in Busselton and the Southwest as well.
No worries. You're probably right in saying it's a safe budget.
Yeah.
In terms of tax law changes, there's nothing in there that you would look at and say, wow, that's something new and significant. That's something that would cause anybody any form of great concern in terms of anything. And yeah, it is a fairly safe budget. There's probably nothing monstrously innovative in there for any development or change.
Right.
Which usually you'd like to see that, but given where we are in electoral cycles and the like, a lot of commentators have said that's kind of what was going to be expected.
And do you think that it was taking a lot into account, the Treasury, in terms of our progress or our recovery, as it's always been put in economic circles? Obviously, that's globally, but for us down here, tucked away in this nice little almost haven, this health haven down here that we have, if we put ourselves into perspective, do you feel like the budget as well has taken a lot of that into account, looking at what's gone up in the Northern Hemisphere, maybe a rest around the world, and thinking we're just not sure? So we're kind of keeping ourselves a little bit to ourselves is the feeling for me.
Look, I think it is. I mean, there's certainly some of the estimates that Treasury have used based on that, things will open up, and that's hinged on the vaccine rollout. But I mean, I guess in many ways also there is some hedging the bets that we just don't know how things are going in other parts of the world. We have India very close to our border. Obviously, places like Brazil, Northern Europe, still grappling with this, and just uncertainty around the world. I mean, we've seen that, some trade tensions between certain trading partners and some tensions over in the Middle East still. Those types of things. I mean, when you look through some of the numbers in the budget, in terms of GDP growth, in terms of wage growth, they're all very minimal.
Right.
Their projections for growth for wages and the like are not high, which may be out of whack with somewhere like the Southwest, where will become some wages pressures on in certain areas. If you're chasing certain professions like a chef or something like that, there's certainly wage growth pressure there, and there's certainly going to be some more pressure in areas for agriculture as we continue through this COVID. We've had 1 year, backpackers have been here, now they've had to leave. And we're going to get to the second point where the next lot of backpackers who managed to get into the country or been here will now have to cease working and go back. But we don't have a refill, so businesses are going to have some challenges there. And it probably does expose a fair bit in our economy how we have relied on backpackers as a solution to vacancies. And we really need to think about why that is and how we do that in the future.
Well, I'd definitely love to chat on that one. I've got a few thoughts where I'd love to put to you on that one. It's obviously down a little bit for me where it's a mindset as well as us as workers. We don't value those sorts of professions, or even maybe that opportunity, as let's say that the Europeans would. The open road and just get on it and tour around, and then sort of live this sort of hand to mouth sort of lifestyle for a little while, which obviously is appealing. And we do have those uni students leaving. There's not the gap year, the opportunities that it were worse to go overseas, but there is obviously those opportunities as we look regional. We should just
Probably
back up a little.
One thing,
yeah.
I was just going to say, the one thing on the particularly backpackers and farmers that
yes.
need to change the mindset, and politicians love to come out and talk about it. Well, we should, they always say dole budget, but it's a terrible word. But people, they should be filling these vacancies. The reality is, if you talk to farmers, they go, well, we don't want them.
Yeah.
There's occupational health and safety risks on farms. I grew up on a farm. Livestock are dangerous. Machinery is dangerous. It all involves a large amount of knowledge and training. It's not unskilled. Picking isn't unskilled labour, because if you pick the wrong stuff, farmer can't sell it, and that's automatic loss. Same with wineries. You can't just go through a winery and I'll just prune all these vines. You prune them incorrectly, then no grapes grow. So it's not unskilled, and I think we need to recognise that. So I think it's a disservice to agriculture to say unskilled, and they certainly, a number of parties need to get together and work out how they're going to invest back in, because one of the things of COVID is that agriculture is important, and we've certainly seen that.
Do you think that that's a little bit of, I don't know, we're going to get to a bit of an overview, but it's really interesting just to see that. I saw the investment in terms of soil regeneration program, or at least a carbon neutralization program. Do you think that that's enough support for the farmers? I mean, we are starting to re-look at the way that we've been farming for the last obviously only a couple of hundred years here, but I mean, in terms of, let's say, this mechanical farming and getting maybe back to some of our roots in terms of our ancestry, and look at the way that we've been managing the land in Australia as our own agricultural management and land management system, rather than adapting from the Europeans and bringing that down and try to make it fit here.
Yeah, I think that's probably the main point, is that a lot of farmers, obviously generational knowledge as they've been farming here with, originally brought in European farming practices, but a lot of the new generations, a lot of people have spent some time, especially when they suffer through droughts, to think about what they're doing. I think we're seeing that even when people are still doing, broadacre and those types of farming, you're seeing differences in how people plough and use machinery. Certainly there's different tillage practices are coming in, certainly in dairy industry, where, obviously, use of automation and being able to use employees in different ways, so around animal health and the like. Certainly, economic pressures on there, and buying, the input costs will cause people to change how they're farming. Fertilizer goes up, the fuel prices go up, people are becoming more environmentally conscious around climate changing. What do I, and how and when do I farm? The problem with agriculture is all those things actually take a significant time. You can't just change that overnight, because you're dealing with land, you're dealing with birthing cycles and the like. So it's actually a very time extensive process to do that, and it's probably well outside of most government budget and department time circles where they want to tick something off. It just doesn't that way.
Right. So there's probably something in there. Maybe we should have a look in there. There's definitely a few things in the budget in terms of, investment, and maybe extending some of those programs where those smaller businesses or even, farms are able to invest in the machinery. And there's a few offsets in like that. I'm wondering if you could talk us through a little bit about what the budget that was handed down last week, what it looks like, and maybe what's missing as well.
All right, so I've got these slides. I'll put these slides up of the budget.
Perfect.
Which are the main parts of the budget, and also, what everybody wants to see about, deficits and income, and, where money's going and where money's being received from. So I have done some work on that. So I'll put that up on the screen.
Perfect.
So hopefully you can see that.
Yeah.
So obviously, before we go too far ahead in the budget, that doesn't work. There we go. Obviously, things got to get through Parliament first. So any measures that have been introduced on budget night, they still have to pass Parliament. So, we ask people to, get some good advice before they go and make a decision. In terms of actual budget itself, we can see each year we have a budget, and it's important to look at actuals. and see how close the budgeting is. Treasury puts a lot of work in trying to present a budget that is reflective of the upcoming year and then future projections. But sometimes they don't always get it right. Sometimes there's things beyond their control. Certainly in the last year or so, as we'd see, down 2020, 2021, 2020 was a year that nobody could ever project, and we actually, for the first time, for a long time, had a budget that was after May because the government just didn't know.
Yeah,
and needs some time frame to make some budgets. 2021's budget that we can see there, it was well over about 260 billion was the deficit that was projected for the year, and that was wrapped around things such as a JobKeeper payment and what they believed would be a significant decrease in revenue from individuals and companies and money going to super, taxation of super, both on contributions and investment returns.
Mm-hmm.
But in Australia, itself, our economy being insulated from the grief that COVID has caused around in other countries, we've had a good return of income and taxation to the government. We've also had less uptake of JobKeeper. The regional Treasury estimates were less than what they thought.
Gotcha.
Some of the other programs that they've put in there haven't had the level of take-up as what they thought and what they budgeted. The JobMaker hiring credit, which I think they've put about $4 billion. They've had 630 people employed. So it really has had no movement in the market. So they were all the things that were budgeted and haven't just hasn't come to fruition really.
Is that an awareness thing, or were the kind of guidelines for JobMaker, is that too rigid?
It's extremely rigid. I've had some clients look at it and you go into it and you just, well, the person that you're looking at can't pass. So, and most employers are looking at going, no, I can't pass any of these employees. They just don't meet the conditions. So,
sure.
And a lot of employers, they're not going out to employ somebody under it as well. It's a decision. I'm employing this person because I want them.
Yeah.
Do they fit afterwards? And probably that's the right decision. You employ them because you want them, not because you're going to get tax benefit from it.
That's it. Yeah.
So for most people, it really hasn't had much traction. There's a couple others there around some of the housing ones originally and the like, just haven't grabbed the traction that they could have. And maybe it's, again, in the last year, we've had a fair bit of policy on the run due to, an unprecedented year, in all fairness there. JobKeeper's probably, obviously we've talked about that in the past. It's been the one big thing that came through for its rights and wrongs, particularly down here. It was very helpful for the community as a whole down here. Yeah, definitely. In terms of receipts versus surplus or deficit, there's always a lot of talk about whether we're going to have deficits, when we're going to have surpluses. Budgets always have projections of when we're going to get back into surplus. There's no real projection of when we're going to get back into surplus. But the big one, I guess, down the bottom is our net financial worth. So it's the net assets of the government, where that's going over time. And that's obviously, since COVID hit 2020, that's taken fairly a downward projection. It's still projected to head in that way. Various economists would have different views on that. Okay. And certainly some new economic thought out there that whether deficit is good or bad depends on how that's being spent. Yeah. You've got a deficit, but that is being used to fund internal cost, so nurses, teachers, etc. Yep. And it doesn't have an impact on inflation. Whereas if you are funding, and it doesn't really affect the budget in the long term. Whereas if you're using debt and deficit to fund offshore purchase, where you exchange hard capital, hard currency, such as defence purchases and the like, that isn't good. for budget. So there's a few different economic thoughts out there on it. I think it's probably more important that governments are getting closer in their projections of what's their deficit's going to be, budget to actual. I think that's probably one of the biggest important parts, because if you have got a pathway to start reducing your debt, if you've got to have a pathway to having surpluses in the future, that's going to rely on you actually being good with your projections.
Yeah.
I think it's important. Treasury gets a lot of information nowadays through the uptake of some of our better accounting systems out there, the real-time data that's coming through. Certainly they will be getting through from the banks data on merchant services. So the ATO gets all that data on merchant services. So they are getting some real-time data on economic activity nowadays, instead of waiting for people to fill out the old BAS, the ABS reports that used to come out that people would put aside and never actually do. So they are getting better information. So hopefully future projections of budgets, as that works into their new systems, will be better.
And we get to have a look in, it's good, perfect. So we can have a look at what's actually coming in the context.
Where's it come from?
Yeah.
So, I mean, where's it come from? The biggest category, as usual, is us. Individual taxation, $225 billion. So we're talking, your normal income tax, Medicare levies, and the rest. We have a few other areas. So sales tax, GST, a few other sales taxes in there, almost 80 billion. Company resource taxes, 85 billion. Superannuation, interesting in the budget papers, and what I've read there, superannuation taxes looks to double this year compared to last year. And I think that's where they viewed that a lot of the super funds wouldn't be making any money in the COVID and the shares, and people wouldn't be contributing to super. A lot of people actually pulling out of super. That's why. The one I will talk about is fuels excise. So we will pay excise on fuels. Some people will get that back in businesses, fuel tax credits. This is one I think we actually probably have to look at the next couple of years. that will actually decrease. They've budgeted to start going up. But when you just have a look around the place, the amount of hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, I know in places things such as agriculture, which are heavy fossil fuel user in terms of oil and fuel, that where they're changing now, people are looking to have, battery powered. People are, instead of rounding up sheep with a motorbike or ute, they're now using drones, battery powered. A lot of the big manufacturers are looking at battery powered, electric tractors. There's in the news, I saw, and I was reading some reports on over east where they're setting up a series of battery runs for trucking firms. Between Sydney and Brisbane, and you've got about 100,000 input, set up cost per truck. A number of trucking companies got on this, and basically the batteries we set up at these recharge stations at mandatory rest breaks all the way up and down between Brisbane and Sydney. And it's a 3-minute changeover for the battery. So the forklift pull the new battery in and away they go. And the trip from Sydney to Brisbane will be about $500 versus then normally spend $1,500, $2,000 in fuel. All of that component there is, goes into excise. And I just think that in the next couple of years, I'm pretty confident we'll see that excise take, unless they lift the rate, decrease quite a lot. Everybody I talk to all now just saying, next car I get is going to be electric. It's going to be hybrid. And I think the interesting part in the budget, there's nothing there for that to increase EV uptake, but the market is already doing it. The overseas manufacturers, and we don't have a car manufacturing industry in Australia anymore. They're all going electric. In fact, there's small car manufacturers here, very small. But they've started to they've released an electric ute that can do everything that most utes do. So I think the market has moved. I think the government's behind on this, and I think it's very much behind on this because they've put aside $50 billion over 5 years or 4 years for fossil fuel subsidies, which is quite amazing in this day and age. So, and I think we've seen on the news the concern about oil refineries in Australia shutting down, and they're prepared to put $2 billion in there to help them stay open. Yeah, we're not seeing any greater investment in renewable energies.
In renewables, yeah.
Yeah, so that one's a real, because I think we're getting hit on a couple of spots there. I think excise will continue, will actually go down. Everybody's making a consumer choice to change away from it. Businesses are making that consumer choice. They're pulling out wherever they can. The solar power batteries go up everywhere. And as places in the southwest here, I mean, we've got that massive lithium refinery coming in up.
Bushes,
that's going to push battery prices down. I think people have got an appetite for that change.
And absolutely.
Appetite, they move very quickly. Probably the other areas here, there's a lot of other taxes that we see, a lot of custom duties, excises on, things like alcohol, cigarettes, and then we have, about $4 billion fringe benefits tax, which is probably one of the least well administrated parts of our Taxation Act, but it certainly does bring some in. It's important, I think, to look at how that area has moved. So I've got some stats going back to 2013-14, and then I'll compare it to the income take now, and we can definitely see that the greatest share of contribution to government coffers really is individual income tax. And that's continued to be that way over the last 10 years. Even though we've had tax cuts and that, we've still continued to, be the greatest contributor to the budget and have the greatest area of growth.
And that's going to continue from the look of it this year as well, despite some individual and maybe some tax benefits there. Maybe we'll get into that presently as well around what small businesses can expect.
Where the money is then expended. So we've got some pretty broad categories here in the budget. Health, 94 billion. Education, 42. Defence, about 33. Other economic affairs, which is things like trade and road networks and the like. The biggest one, as usual, is social security and welfare. So $225 billion each year. So that includes, the biggest component of that is the age pension, also aged care, which has received a significant boost after some of the findings from, they have a royal commitment to aged care, the NDIS, and other, but we're just talking general welfare. Sometimes we need to be careful on how we label that though. Things like the NDIS, they call stuff that as welfare, but, I'm an NDIS participant. I have 2 family members in NDIS, and to label it welfare is really strong, primarily because they're getting care and community engagement and support for their needs. And in that process, we employ 2 support workers, so we pay 2 people for their time. So they're paying tax. We pay their super, so our government's collecting super on that. Pay other providers such as speech pathologists, psychologists, occupational therapists, physio, with that money for them to engage in the services. So they're people that are being employed, they're paying rent in the local community. That's one of the key things about social welfare, social security, is that it's a lot of money actually going on the ground in the local communities. We saw that when they increased job seeker, that had a very beneficial effect on this community as well, because there's more money spent in local communities. And I think that's very important that we continue to understand that. And we look at this great big figure here, but that's not people getting all that money. There's a lot of government services there, a lot of officers and the like. But there's also a lot of other things that's including that. It's including all their technology. But there's other things such as we look at Job Seeker and those income management, the Indue card that's come out.
Yes.
I'm quite actually concerned about that. Me personally, we're looking at putting people on income management who may be getting about 17 to 18 grand a year in benefits. Cost for an Indue card for the company that manages it to the government, it's approximately 11 grand a year to manage that. So when we look at these big figures here, we need to be very careful. Where is that money going? And how could we do that better?
Right.
I think that's very important.
Yep.
We looked at revenue and how it's changed, and I think it's important we look at expenses and how that's changed. Yep. All areas have grown, as you expect in a growing economy. You might have more people. There's always more expenditure. For sure. Security, that's gone up most, and really the two areas here. We've had the introduction of the NDIS. So only a couple of years ago, we didn't have the NDIS. So all those costs have caused a very big spike in Social Security, but we never had it before.
Right.
Bear in mind, that's funded partly through Medicare levy. And NDIS is an insurance scheme. So when we have underspends, the money is supposed to stay in the scheme. And I must point out that 2 years ago, the government took $4 billion from the NDIS and put it back into general revenue instead of leaving it in the scheme. There's a lot of from the government saying that they need to trim the NDIS. It's getting too big, it's costing too much. They took $4 billion from it, only just reaching its targets as per the Productivity Commission's report. And bearing in mind that it was also supposed to be another 0.05 increase in the Medicare levy, which would have raised another $8 billion for the NDIS. So it's $12 billion down. That's still right. So we need to be very careful on that. Our health, obviously, that's gone up a lot. Aging economy.
Yes.
Education's gone up, has raised, but in the last budget and in this budget here, we've had a fair few cuts for higher education. I think we need to really look at investing back in higher education. There's no investment in higher education in this budget, and we need to remember that universities did not get access to JobKeeper.
Right.
And their other major source of funding is overseas students, which they don't have at the moment. So but important for our economy, for the future, for down here, for the jobs when we want to talk about innovation and growth. We have large sections of mining industry here. We have large sections of agriculture, viticulture. All those industries require people that have had a good higher education. So that's scientists, whether you're looking at health, nurses, they've all gone to university. So we need that investment for the next group of people that are coming through and have a pathway for our kids if they choose to go there.
Particularly for this region, as we say, wanting to keep the labour and the skilled labour down here and really promote that. But obviously, if we don't get any higher education or lack of investment into higher education, then our kids have got no choice but to look at the Bunbury, Perth and things like that,
Absolutely. And I will say, I'll actually go back to the NDIS where you talk about moving to Perth. Yeah. About 10 years ago, down here, there was, and this actually goes outside the NDIS and general health, but for somebody to get access to a psychologist, child psychologist down here, or child physio, child IT, there was nothing here. No one. Yep. There was one psychologist that worked with children down here. That was it. When we started the rollout investment through NDIS, which originally came out through the state system of My Way, and then it merged NDIS, we've had a massive lot of professionals move down here. Yes. Because there is now a market for them. So you're creating markets outside your capital cities. Yep. And that's a good thing.
Which has got to be a strategy.
Yeah, we saw that when you have improvements to the hospital here. We had a new hospital in Busselton. What did we get? We got a whole lot of surgeons who wouldn't even consider coming to work here, and heart specialists and down here, or at least be here part-time, which gave our people here access instead of having to drive all the way to Perth. Yep. Which, let's face it, is actually more expensive because most of them would claim various types of rebates like PATs to get to Perth specialists. So, fix the hospitals and people can come and see them here. And now with telehealth, having telehealth facilities, you can go in and use your telehealth facility and see a specialist who can't get down here. your people and families don't have to make that travel, which is obviously to be far better, locally. So I think it's really important, this money going out in regional communities is important.
Yes.
It does have a beneficial effect. On to the fund tax side of things, I guess, in the budget.
Good. Yeah.
So we've kind of got it mixed up into, I guess, the sectors. So, like your corporates and your individuals, and the tax law tends to, I guess, in many ways it's discriminatory. This applies against corporates, or this applies against an individual. So I guess it is discriminatory in that. So we've gone through and had a bit of a look at how the budget has treated those people from a tax perspective. For large corporates and corporates, kind of give it a bit of a very good budget for your large businesses. Not all this is new. Some of this is a continuation of from previous budgets, and they've just maintained that within this budget. So our instant asset write-offs, that has continued. So in terms of investment in machineries, you can write that off. And so instead of writing that off over its whole useful life, so if you bought a car, maybe that's 12 years, a truck, that's 15 years, something like that, this you can get an instant asset write-off. I must say, though, this is only of benefit if you are earning money. If you're running money a business at a loss, getting another asset doesn't get you any tax back. This is not back. And people should always look at this in the light of how much, what's my rate on the dollar that I pay in tax? If you're a company, a small company, base rate entity, you're going to be paying tax at 27.5%. So if you're paying out something worth $100, the tax saving you're saving is $27.50. So that difference that you actually pay out of your pocket, you need to be making sure that that's working for your business. That's actually going to earn you money. Otherwise, it's still just a loss. So same as the old negative gearing philosophy. Those people who say, it's good to have a negative geared house and poor to have the positive geared house. Well, I just fundamentally disagree with that, because you're better to earn money than to lose money.
And to lose it later. Yeah.
You shouldn't make business decisions solely on the tax benefit. It should be, earning more money, better employee welfare, or yourself. If it's a piece of equipment allows you to do more, or looks after your health better instead of breaking your back. That shouldn't just be the tax consequence that tells you to make that decision. One of the other things is that we're allowed to have do loss carrybacks now. So if companies who may have paid tax in 2019, 2020 and 2021, you make a loss, you can go backwards and apply a loss carryback. That does have some implications, though, on whether companies are going to be able to pay dividends in the future. So, it's a discussion people should have with their accountant, whether you look at taking those loss carrybacks. Conversely, if you've got a loss in a company and you have that ability to do that carryback, you can't do that if you're trading in a trust or a partnership. It just doesn't work.
Right.
Because trusts or partnerships don't pay tax. They distribute money to either, the partners or the beneficiary, and they pay the tax. So
and they pay it. Yep.
If you have a loss in a trust, it just sits there until the year you have a gain. So those rules don't help them.
Right.
For some of the small and large corporates, there is a little bit more some powers around being able to argue with the ATO on some of their assessments and debt recovery actions, just to increase the powers for the appeals tribunal to be able to make rulings against the ATO and in favour of businesses, if that's the way the case works. And there's also some changes that will increase support for excise refunds to brewers and distillers. So that may be of value to some people down here.
Absolutely, yeah. It's good to see that we get a few industry-specific breaks there. So that's good for us down here. It obviously provides a few little rays in terms of innovations or opportunities opening up as well for those entrepreneurs down here.
Absolutely. You can see the number of breweries we have now down here. Number of distilleries are starting up in Western Australia or already established, and they would like that to continue, and for also them to be competitive too. I mean, distilleries, it's not an easy startup game, and there's a fair leading, so to help them in that process.
Yeah.
So small to medium industries, entities, budgets, fairly good. There is this SME loan schemes. Again, there's some rules around it, and basically what it's saying is that there's going to be some government guarantee on some loans that you take out, but you still got to talk to your bank. So the bank still has to be willing to loan this money to you in the first place. Consequently, you have to be able to make the loan repayments. So it's taken a while for the banks to be able to get their systems around this. So this is not a new, not a new measure, but it's been in the, it was in the previous budget. It's been around for a while. But the banks have had to do a lot of work to get their own systems in place, and they've also had to juggle their workload of everybody applying for a loan pause when COVID hit, and then going through their reviews. So it's taken us a while there for the banks. I personally haven't seen any clients take this up.
No, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of knowledge about it, and again, businesses who are doing really well aren't even thinking about this type of stuff. Businesses are really struggling, probably won't be able to get funding from the bank in the first place.
Right.
So it seems like a good measure there, but it's,
you've got to be primed for it. You're maybe on the cusp of scaling, essentially.
Yes.
For one of a better reason. Either I don't imagine that no bank would be getting into those startup loans, or very few, very high sort of interest rates there. So not going to be taking risks there. But this really seems to be aimed at those who are on the cusp of maybe expanding into a new branch, getting that new machinery, maybe taking, I don't suppose you're going to be taking that loan because you want to be covering the expected cost of rising workforce either. There's not going to be some.
No, it's. I think it's got a very specific use base. I think most businesses won't be looking at it.
Yeah. So, is there anything else in terms of tax breaks for us in small businesses?
Continue the instant asset write-off is probably a big one that's out there. Based on your structure, if you're a company, then you're a separate legal entity. You have its own tax exoneration rate, its own own laws. All the other business structures ultimately feed down to individuals. So most of the tax breaks sit in the individual world. So from the instant asset write-off, which is
then let's have a look at that as well. Pulling up for the morning, we'll get through some individuals, and then maybe have a look what it means for us in terms of tax, and then maybe get an overview generally about what you think's coming up for Busso.
Individuals. So currently with self-education, we've always had this been in there since I went to uni. The first $250 you couldn't claim. That's going to be removed from the 1st July 2021. So you can claim, if you got $1,000 of self-education costs that qualify, you actually only get to claim $750. Well, that's now been removed, so you can get to claim the whole lot. The Medicare levy for low-income thresholds, it will go up. Medicare levy, it's a shaded provision, so it depends on the number of dependent children and the like. So it doesn't come in like our normal income tax tables. You earn X amount of money, you pay this. There's some shading provisions that people can go up and down as, say if a child is born or whatever their arrangements are. So that shading provision has been lifted, which does help lower income people, which is good. Nothing bad in terms of pure taxation has come in this year. There's nothing. So, when we talk about the budget before, we said, it's fairly safe there. There's nothing anybody's going to go. The low to medium tax offset has been remained as $1,050. need to just be aware that it's not a refundable tax offset. So if people have got franking credits, the low to medium tax offset kick will go in, and it'll say, okay, you're going to get, this is the amount of tax that you should have paid. Low to medium tax offset comes in and says, okay, you don't have to pay that. You don't get that back unless you've got something like a franking credit that will actually be back to you. So it's not a refundable tax offset. Which is, we have a separation between what's a refundable tax offset and what is just a tax offset. So, so it's always a lot of people in previous years thought, okay, I should be getting $1,005 back.
No, it's not that. Yeah, gotcha.
Superannuation. So not a lot of movement in superannuation. Some of the financial planners would be rapt about that, because for the last 10 years, we've had a lot of work on super, and super is probably one of those areas where, if people to be confident, we need to have a lack of change so they can be confident what they want to do investment into. But the probably big one, the downsize of contribution. So that's when somebody's looking to retire, and if they're over 65, they could sell their house. So say if they had a house in, say, Big Park, sell the house and put a lump sum contribution into their super fund of 300,000. That has been, the age limit of that has been reduced from 65 to 60. It's part of a tool to help with our problems with housing that we have.
Yeah.
To encourage, I guess, those closer to retirement and who don't need the 4x2 and the bigger yard to move to a downsize.
Yep.
How effective that is, I don't have any stats on, but it's certainly there. I'm not sure generally in the community it's that well known about, but certainly is a measure there.
Well, definitely something as well for town planners as we go through that phase here of maybe needing the extra accommodation, extra housing down here, but for what types of people, for what demographics. And obviously, if we're looking at that and we're thinking about downsizing, but we also have the family blocks that are just getting charged through the bush, there may be something that we need to look at. There's a lot of talk, a lot of backlash about going up, obviously here in our coastal areas and things like that, but it might be something that matches, rather having smaller, denser town centres or village centres, at least, that may be 2 to 3 stories high rather than the single, that might actually pay in a little bit later.
I think you obviously have to look at what land we want to be building on.
Right.
I think we've got 3. You've got bush, coastal reserve, farmland.
Yeah.
So which do we want to build on? Well, farmland, we can't keep eating into it, or otherwise we don't have anything to eat. Bush, we do need to retain our bush.
Yeah, we've got a lot of
climate point of view.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a shortage of beach land in the southwest. In Australia, we've got the most coastlines anywhere in the world for a single nation. Maybe the whole concept of we actually do need to be building more onto our beach land where we can, where it's taking the factors of climate change and erosion and those types of stuff. But strip is not as productive in terms of producing food and other things than what farmland and bushland is. So I can understand people not wanting higher density housing, but the reality is that we are going to have more and more people here, so maybe we have to have it. Yeah. So then it's a design question.
Exactly. It's about how and where to move.
Yeah, and there's good examples around the world, people who are
absolutely
very well. We just need to go and look at it.
That's it. So, Grant, looking at trying to wrap up this morning so that we can also get some reaction as well from folks out in Busso as well, invite people to ask us questions. Where do you think the budget in a whole, what do you think will move or change a little bit? Obviously, we see a few very safe moves there from the government, but what does that mean for Busso, for us here?
Look, there's not a huge impact for Busselton here. I mean, probably, we'll touch on one here just in regards to superannuation. I've just got a couple of changes that I think our business community needs to be aware of. first one is the default benefit funds. So your default funds, we had a change coming up on the 1st of July that the person's first super fund is now the default super fund. So previously it was the person, the industry you're in, if somebody doesn't give you their super fund details, then an industry fund becomes their default one. But now their first super fund they ever had. The ATO has been doing a whole lot of work. There should be a website up and going live 1st of July. If businesses employ someone and they don't give you their super fund details, you'll need to go and search on this ATO site. That will be the new law to get that through. So 1st of July, you go and find out, put a person's name and details in and find out what their default super fund was. Probably trying to stop people having 10 industry funds. That's one super fund. The other one is that minimum wage threshold for superannuation guarantee, the $450 per month, has been removed. And I think that's a good move, because there's a lot of people who are working, only casually in the gig economy. Yep. And also for particularly older women who've only got a small amount of part-time work where they weren't getting super paid. I think that's a very good change, and that has an effect here where we have got such casualised workforce down here. Yeah. And we have got, obviously a lot of seasonal work and, gig economy down here. I think it's very important that businesses do that. Your software most software will deal with it, but people need to know that. But I think that's good for certainly the inequity we see in the super balances of various genders. That one is a real big issue. I wouldn't say that the budget itself has anything that is massive for the Southwest. It doesn't have anything in there that is a negative for the Southwest, but I think what we have seen is that it is reliant on, at some stage, opening up. Yes. Following a vaccine rollout. And I think that's a big one for the Southwest around that, because particularly here in Busselton, where we've got that airport and we've got the opportunity to be getting flights from Melbourne, flights from Singapore. We've been talking about that for a while. The Melbourne ones were lined up and then just had to cease for a while. We would like to see that, for our tourism take off. Yeah. But that's really going to depend on a vaccine rollout. And I think the big thing for the budget is that a lot of that is really reliant on that. Yes, and then taking that advice, isn't it? The vaccine rollout here, protecting ourselves before, I assume, welcoming back those strangers. But it's interesting as well, and there's probably some questions out there as well for those travellers as well. It's keeping us here. It's keeping our dollars here, maybe more so than, stopping others coming in. It's rather not letting these all of the, the programs and the investment and the support the Australian government have obviously given us as citizens, not wanting to let that just go out with a shot in the arm and you're off. So I can obviously understand it from there, but like you said, it's going to be interesting how that plays out, and also then interesting how the temperament of our folk deal with that as well once they see the rest of the world starting to move around freely. But look, time is probably getting the better of us this morning, Grant. So I'd love to maybe move those questions, and maybe we'll see, we might get a follow-up and see what happens in the comments as we post this one to the rest of the community. But from my side as well, it's been really great chatting with you and getting that overview, and look forward to obviously, hopefully, speaking more about the way that this unfolds and the investment starts to roll out if we start to see it down here in Busselton. Yeah, and look, obviously, I think we talked previously based on timings. The next year, sometime we've got to have a federal election. So we've got a budget here, but there was somebody noted there's a line item there for about $10 billion in the budget that isn't assigned. Right. So I think the reality is the government has a war chest that they want to use come election time. Yeah. And the opposition will obviously say, well, there's that money there. So it'll be interesting to see what they both say they're going to do. I say, you never know.
You never know.
That is the reality, is that, we have got an election within the next year sometime, and we'll be looking to revisit this at that time.
Perfect. All right. Well, Grant, Avery, thanks so much. Again, RSM Busselton providing us with a lot of expert knowledge and a little bit of a rundown. A week after the budget's come down, the dust has settled, and we've had a chance to look at what that really means for us in terms of our small community here in Busselton. Thanks once again, Grant, Avery, and we'll chat to you soon.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day as well, Busselton. We've been here at the City of Busselton AMA. See you next time.